everyone has a different story to tell. Shell, which says it's losing the
Tampa market. Skyrocketing rise.
In Northeast Africa, precisely on the horn of Africa.
All right, good morning, folks. Good morning, Dennis. How you doing, man? Welcome to the Revolutionary Repatriation Educational Lecture Series as part of WCC every Friday. So I am your host, Frank Mauba. This morning, we're going to be speaking of few things. So today's topic is called was climate change a scam? Climate change, was it a scam in the Scramble for Africa? Now, I'm not saying here, right, like climate change is not real. That's not what I'm saying. All right. I'm not saying it's not real. What I'm saying here is, was it a scam? All right. Over the Scramble for Africa, was it a scam that the West was using in order to get Africa? Was it a scam? And into that discussion, we're also going to look at Africa vision. What is the vision of Africa? What is the position of Africa? All right. In this current situation of global crisis. All right. So Africa vision or position for the continent. What is a vision of African leaders for the continent? What is the position of African leaders for the continent in this discussion that we are about to have today? So, was climate change a scam? Was it a topic that the global West was trying to use to get Africa? Was it a discussion or a means that the global West was trying to use to get Africa on their side? Was it a scheme that it was using to get Africa in order for them to continue their global domination? Was it a scheme that they were using in order for Africa not to rise, in order for Africa not to take a position to stand on her own? Was it a form of the 1963 Monrovia versus the Casablanca group? Was it a form of it? And I believe, yes, it was a form of the 1963 Casablanca and the Monrovia group. And we're going to see that in the discussion today, because Africa does not even have a position up to now. Africa does not have a vision up to now. And it is a shame to the African leaders, because the African leaders are just going by the flow. The African leaders are just jumping on a ship and just going. They are not a captain. African leaders are not the captain. They are just getting on a ship, on a boat, on a canoe, and they're just going. While somebody pair them, while somebody leading them, and they're just going because of the crumbs. African leaders are just going. So was climate change a scam? I'm not saying there's no global warming, but was it a scam that it was trying to use on African leaders? Let's continue into this. Was it a scheme because certain group of empire are failing and they wanted to use Africa as they have always used Africa to build their economy, to build their empire? So let's look at an article, and then we're going to base that article on the rest of the discussion. And then we're going to see the position of Africa, because Africa does not have position in this current time. Africa have no vision. Africa lack vision. All right. Africa lack vision and no position in this current time. Let's continue. Now, first of all, let me make this disclaimer. What I'm about to discuss here today is not about America. It's not about Europe. It's about Africa. All right. But we are going to use America. We are going to use Europe. Even we are going to use Asia. It's not about them. It's about discussing what is happening and then seeing the position of Africa and then seeing what measure or role Africa can take. It's not about these imperialists or these Western nations. These Western nations are already doing what is in their best interest. But what is Africa doing? So it's not about America, all right? It's not about Europe. It's about Africa and African people, period. Now, so this first article here says factcheck.org. All right, it's a factcheck.org. All right, so it says unequivocal evidence that human causes climate change, contrary to post of old video. All right, so Check Digest. There is unequivocal evidence that humans are causing global warming, the UN climate change panel has said. But viral posts revive a 2014 video of Weather Channel co-founder John Coleman falsely claiming climate change is not happening. So some are saying climate change is not happening, and some are saying climate change is happening. So it could be that those that are saying that climate change is not happening, it could be they are basing their narrative or their research on thousands of years ago, there was climate change. But at that time, there was not much human activities. Like, for example, thousands of years ago, they said there was a climate change where they had dinosaurs, and due to that effect, you know, there was wildfire, there was global warming, and animals like dinosaurs, they die, and, you know, through that global change or through that or climate change or wildfire, right? So it could be that some of these scientists are also basing their analysis on that. Thousands of years ago, there wasn't much human activities, but climate change still occurred. Right? Climate change still occurred. Right? Now, it was still because of climate change, we had 7 continents. That was not by means of, how they call it, the Most High creation, that he created the 7 continents. And, you know, Asia on the other side, Africa on the other side, and then this on the other side, right? It was also through climate change. It was also through global warming, I believe, right? Okay, so let's continue. I'm just giving my analysis too, right? I'm not saying there is nothing like global warming, and I'm not saying there is global warming. Look at what is being done there, okay? I'm not a scientist. I'm just reading what scientists bring out and try to analyze it and see where I stand and see my position. Let's continue. The channel which support the scientific consensus that climate change is real had distanced itself from common. So let's see here. So these are scientists are fighting among themselves, right? Let's continue. Now, a vast and growing body of scientific evidence shows that climate change is occurring and is largely caused by human activity, as we have written on multiple occasions. Like I said, today's discussion is not about the debate whether climate change is real or climate change is not real. The discussion is, was climate change a scheme used for the scramble of Africa? That's the discussion. The discussion is not about whether climate change is real or is not real. The discussion is about, was it a scam? Was it actually used as a means to scramble over Africa? All right, let's continue. But we're going to read this and try to connect the dot as we go on. Follow me. Widespread and rapid changes have occurred as a result of climate change, and many changes are irreversible. For at least century, the UN climate partner said, the UN climate partner said in another report issued in 2021, many changes in the climate system become large in direct relation to increasing global warming. The 2021 report said they include increases in the frequency and intensity of hot extreme. Now, listen to that. Listen to this. They include increases in the frequency and intensity of hot extreme. Now, before I started, I made a statement that thousands of years ago, there were not much human activities, or there was not human activities as compared to today. But there was still climate change. There was still global warming that led to the extinction of some creature like dinosaur, right? Now, let's read this again. They include increases in the frequency and intensity of hot weather. There was hot weather thousands of years ago, right? There was not human, it wasn't caused by human activities. It was climate change. It was global warming, right? So could it be that this time around, even though there is still human activities, could it be that what happened thousands of years ago is repeating, is occurring, and scientists are trying to use this means to say it is caused by human activities? Again, I'm not a scientist. I'm just reading. But that is not to say there is nothing of global warming. I'm just reading and trying to bring to you the narrative. Okay, let's continue here. Let's continue. They include increase in the frequency and intensity of hot extreme, marine heat wave, heavy precipitation, and in some region, agriculture and ecological drought out. Now, you see here, so there are a lot of activities here, right? A lot of things or words or evidence mentioned here, right? That is not even caused by human activities, okay? And some are caused by human activities, like what it got, agriculture and ecological drought out. But there are other stuff here. Hot extreme, it is not caused by human alone. Okay, because hot extreme also occurred thousands of years ago. Marine heat wave, that is natural occurrence, all right, in the proportion of intense tropical cyclone, that is also natural occurrence as well. All right, now let's continue here. An reduction in Arctic sea ice snowed over and permafrost. All right, so this is what I want to read. This last area, I'm not going to read the whole article, right? But I want to read this last area and then we're going to connect it from there. Now, because last year was a year that Europe or the Western world took their attention to the African continent. And a lot of times they call African leaders and they made this global warming or this climate change an issue. They make it a case. And African leaders, some of them did not get it, or they thought they were actually talking about climate change. But there was something behind that climate change conference or meeting they were having. There was something behind it. There was something behind it that America and Europe, specifically when we're talking about the West, we're talking about America and Europe, no one else. All right? When we're talking about the imperialists, we are talking about America and Europe, no one else. All right? There was something behind it they were using. Look, folks, for each time the Western world come out with an issue that they try to involve African in it, we should look behind deep. There is something that they are not telling us. There is something they are fighting for, but they are not telling us. What they are telling us is not what exactly they are bringing to the table. It's not what exactly they are aiming at. Let's continue here. Don't believe me. Let's continue here. As the effect of climate change become increasingly evident, the issue is also becoming increasingly political. Listen to this. So, was this whole climate change also have a political motive? That's the question now. Was this climate change, did it also have a political motive? Yes. Yes. For what I have researched and what I have seen, yes, it had a political motive. The motive was not exactly about focus on climate change. It was not exactly about let's save our planet. It was not exactly about, we need to save life. That's not what it was about. It was political. Let's continue here. Just week after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in June to restrict the Environmental Protection Agency ability to regulate carbon emission, President Joseph R. Biden, President Joe Biden, said he would take strong executive action. I don't know, where did that executive action go? Where did it go, President Biden? This climate change was politically motivated. It was not about saving African life. It was not about saving the forests in Africa. It was not about saving the dam, the mineral, the gold, the iron ore, the uranium in Africa. It was not about that. They care less. Where is this executive order, folks? This is where I want to question Joseph R. Biden. Why did he leave this executive order and then he made a U-turn? Instead of saving the continent, saving the planet, he then made a U-turn. Let me read this again. Let me read this over again, folks. This is where I am taking my premise for the discussion today. Let me read this again. As the effect of climate change become increasingly evident, the issue where you should look at the issue, that means there is a conjunction, deviation. Somebody is deviating. That means it wasn't actually about climate change. It wasn't actually about climate change. The issue, conjunction. The issue is also becoming increasingly political. Just week after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in June to restrict the Environmental Protection Agency's ability to regulate carbon emission, President Joe Biden said he would take strong executive action to tackle the climate crisis. If the Senate failed to act, if the Senate failed to act on protecting climate change, President Joseph R. Biden said he would take an executive order to protect climate change if the Senate failed. But here is it. Instead of the Senate failing to do that, President Joseph R. Biden failed. How can the United States say they will do something and they fail to do it? I will preach this morning. African leaders, like I said, this is about Africa. This is about African people. You, African leader, open your ears, open your minds. Stop running to these Western leaders when they come to you. They always have hailing motive. But now we should know. But now you should know. They have never been truthful to us. They will never be truthful to us. Then, what is wrong with the executive order that Joseph R. Biden promised and said, even if the Senate, even if Congress fail to pass law to protect the earth, he would take an executive order in his hand. But today, folks, what I want to say to you is, Joseph R. Biden failed. Let's get to the next article. Like I said, this is not about America or about how they have failed, right? This is about Africa, all right? This is about bringing this information out to enlighten African leaders because they are the one in position of power. If we see these things and keep silent, that's how our African leaders will keep making mistakes, and as they are doing. Let's continue here. Let's see the next article. Now, Joseph R. Biden failed, right? Let's look at that. So, no more climate change, all right? So, right now, it's about currency. Why Joseph R. Biden failed? That's the question now. Why he failed to take executive order? Why America failed to protect the earth? Why America failed on climate change? That's the question that we ask, and that's why we're going now. Now, Joseph Biden did not take the executive order as he promised. He said, even if Congress failed, right, he's going to take executive order. Now, the question is, why Joseph R. Biden failed to take executive order? African leaders. Look, this is not about globalization. There is nothing about globalization. We keep saying it, and 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 we keep saying it. Stop fooling yourself thinking that you are fighting for the entire world. Stop fooling yourself thinking that you are fighting to save everybody. You are not the one that created this universe. So you will not protect and save everybody. You will not. And you will never protect everybody. You will never save everybody. You were not the one that created this universe. You were not the one that gave life to all mankind. So you will not save all mankind. You will not protect all mankind. You will not save all mankind. Let's continue to the next article and see what we are talking about here. So now, we are coming to look at the reason why America failed to enact or to act on climate change, because it's about saving your economy, it's about saving your world, it's about saving your people, it's about saving your empire. So was climate change a scheme used to scramble over Africa? Was it a scam? Yes, it was a scam. Let's continue here. Let's see something here. So let's look at this video here, okay? And see. And then we'll discuss it from there. And then we'll go on from there. We're going to look at where Biden made a U-turn, right? And we're going to look at the reason why they did not support climate change. So right now, there's nothing like climate change. Climate change is out of the way, right? It's out of the way, okay? All right.
America's banking crisis is snowballing. Two US banks have collapsed, and now the crisis is hitting the rest of the world. Yesterday, the US president tried to calm nerves. Joe Biden said the depositors will be made whole, meaning they'll get their money back, and that the US taxpayers will not foot the bill for this. But what about the others? What about people in other countries who are also suffering the consequences? Let me tell you how big the fallout is. The failure of American banks has led to a loss of over $400 billion the world over. $400 billion. This is the loss in financial stocks worldwide, and the bleeding is still on amid a crisis of confidence. So how is India faring? How much are Indian companies exposed to this crisis? Well, there are some, and India has not been unaffected by all of this. Tonight, we'll discuss which companies have been hit and how much. But first, an update on what's happening in the US. The American banking system is still reeling. On Monday, customers were still lining up outside SVB, the Silicon Valley Bank, the first bank that failed in this crisis. Government officials tried to contain the panic. Remember, American regulators have now taken control of the bank. They are the ones in charge, and they're trying to revive the bank. Yesterday, some officials stepped out to meet customers. They bought donuts and coffee and offered words of reassurance.
You will be able to transact business as usual. Your accounts are safe. Your online portals are active. You'll be able to wire and do business as usual. So if you have any questions, feel free to let us know.
So what's happening at SVB right now? The bank is running, but it's not fully operational. They've got a new CEO. Reports say customers have got access to their deposits, but they cannot make cross-border transactions yet. It will take a few more days for the bank to resume all its services, and this is
Now, let's discuss something here because there's a lot of things we're going to discuss here pieces by pieces, right? Now, the question that we should be asking also is, why is the bank holding customer money? Why the bank are holding people money? Why can't you do cross-border transaction? Why can't you do cross-border transaction? I don't want to go ahead of the video, okay? We're going to be discussing bit by bit because, like I said, this is about Africa. All right, and we're going to get to Africa part. But listen to this. All right, pay attention. All right, what you see on CNN, BBC, that's not the case. That's not a real true story. What is happening in the world right now is about protecting your currency. So, protecting your currency. And that was what used to lie to African people about climate change. Why is the bank stopping people from doing cross-border transaction? And a cross-border transaction is not talking about transferring money from state to state. No, cross-border transaction, because there are a lot of people in the U.S. here have businesses outside of the U.S. because of cheap labor. Pay attention. Business people in America here, right? It is safer to save your money here than to save your money in other countries where there are cheap labor. So what they do is they have their money saved in a U.S. bank here, but their companies are overseas. And they pay their employees through the system here. What happening now is, because of the crisis, and business owner or companies, okay, let me not jump ahead of time. I don't want to jump ahead of the video, okay? Let's go back. But, and now you're getting the point. Be with me a little bit.
is bad news for some startups in India. Like I said, Indian companies have also some kind of exposure to this bank. Some Indian startups had accounts in Silicon Valley, and now their money could be stuck. How many companies are we talking about? More than 60, according to one claim. And how much money is stuck here? We do not have the exact figure, but each of these companies has more than $250,000 in their accounts, and out of these, nearly 24 startups have more exposure, meaning at least 24 companies have more money in the bank. We're talking about more than $1 million each. This money is stuck. And which companies are these? We do not have the names. They've not been revealed yet because this disclosure will hurt them. Apparently, their investors are afraid. They're worried that if the names come out, it will hurt the companies in future fundraising. And who are these investors? The likes of Y Combinator, Accel, Sequoia India, Lightspeed, SoftBank, and Bessemer Venture Partners. These are all venture capital firms. Basically, they're big investors in startups, and this is a testing time for them. Imagine if one of these companies has to pay salaries in India with the money stuck in America, or if they have to settle vendor payments here, or bills of any other kind. As of today, they cannot do it from Silicon Valley Bank. That's because
all right, so now let's discuss that part, right? So now you see, these businesses outside of the US, okay, but the CEOs reside in the US. So they keep their money in the US here. First, the question is, why they keep their money in the US, in US dollar? Because once upon a time, now I would say once upon a time, the US currency was so valued, okay? I'm saying once upon a time because this is a recording and it's going to it's going to be recorded. It's going to be saved out there. Okay. Now, so I had to use the past tense. All right. Once upon a time. And I'm using the past tense based on current situation that I have analyzed by myself. Right. Once upon a time, the US currency was so valued and vital to the world. And it was used almost everywhere in the world to pay employees. Okay? The US currency is being used almost everywhere in the world. All right? To pay employees. All right? So these CEO reside in America, but their businesses are outside of America because of cheap labor. So if you bring those companies in America here, you will not pay anybody with cheap. You have to pay people, okay? Higher wages. You're going to pay nobody $5. But these companies in those so-called third world developed nation, all right, or underdeveloped nation, they pay like $5 an hour, $2 an hour, $3 an hour. Minimum. All right? So they make more profit. So they sit down here and then use the bank here, pay their employees. What happened here is that alone have raised or erased the US dollar currency high. Not only that, businesses in the world or country in the world were trading their mineral resources in US dollar. For example, all of Africa, I'm not even going to say almost, the entire African continent, because Africa does not have a currency. All right? Africa does not have a currency. What we use in Africa is not currency. Okay? Because we cannot trade with any currency in Africa. We cannot trade in any currency in Africa. So we use the United States dollar, the European dollar to do trading in Africa. So Africa does not have currency. So that alone, because we trade in the US currency, it carries the value of high. We trade in the European currency, the pound or the euro, it carries the value of high. Now, what happened here now is nations are no longer trading in the US currency, like Saudi Arabia, like China, Russia, even some of the NATO nations. Some of the NATO nations, okay, they are not trading in the Russian dollar because they have to buy the Russian oil. Even as we speak, India is trading with China in the Chinese currency, and if China need anything from India, they trade in the Indian currency. If India want oil from Russia, they're not going to buy in US dollar. They buy in the Russian currency. Saudi Arabia at the same time, they are no longer using the US currency to sell their oil. You want a Saudi Arabian oil, you use their currency. So what happened here is the US currency is dwindling, is failing. So President Biden had to make a U-turn and forget about climate change. President Biden had to make a U-turn and forget about climate change in order to save our empire, in order to save the American empire. All right. I will come back. Let me answer a question here. So Dennis said, do you mean to tell me that there is no African currency on the continent? Therefore, no African on the continent has trading authority? That's the question. Now, to all of us watching, and to some of you that may watch the recording, South Africa, let's look at a bigger nation. I'm not even looking at the smaller nation. Let's look at Nigeria. Let's look at South Africa. Egypt. As for Egypt, Egypt says she's not part of Africa because even Egypt is not even part of AU. Okay? Egypt is not part of AU. So we're not even going to mention Egypt here. But let's look at a bigger nation. Okay, the so-called superpower that we have in Africa. Let's look at South Africa. Let's discuss South Africa. Does South Africa have a currency that if Great Britain want the resources of South Africa, they have to use the South African currency? Does South Africa have a currency that if Australia want the South African diamond or oil or gold whatsoever, that they're going to use the South African currency to buy South African resources? Absolutely not. They use the US dollar or they use the pound to trade. If China go to South Africa and they need the South African resources, South Africa, they're not going to trade in South Africa currency. No. Do they use South Africa currency in America here? Do they use South Africa currency in London? When they talk about the stock exchange, does South Africa have a currency there on our stock exchange? Does South Africa have a currency on our stock exchange? No. Let's go to Nigeria. Does Nigeria have a currency on a stock exchange market to say this is the value of Nigerian currency in a stock exchange? When they are listing the US dollar, the pound, the Russian currency, the Chinese currency, when they are listing all these currency, do they list Nigerian currency to say this is the Nigerian currency? The Nigerian currency drop on a stock exchange? Or in Nigeria, they use the pound to sell their oil or their resources, or they use dollar to trade. In Senegal, the same thing. They have to use the French currency. They don't use Senegalese currency. So I'm not talking about the Liberia. No, Liberia is not nowhere. I'm talking about the superpower that we have in Africa. Kenya does not have currency to say they're coming back the Kenyan resources in the Kenyan currency. At the end of the day, these Western organizations come, or these Westerners come, they come with their currency. America are going to do business with Kenya, or to, let's just say, to buy Kenyan resources. America come with her currency. You see the stupidity with we African. I am coming to buy your resources. I'm coming to do business with you. Then I bring my own currency. I bring in my own currency and tell you the value of my currency. So because you don't have currency, I have the currency. I have to determine the value of your resources. You see the stupidity. Let us pay attention. What is Africa's position? What is Africa's vision? Now you made me, I am jumping ahead of time. This was going to be discussed last. But anyway, however, we will discuss it. How am I coming to make business with you? Then I bring my own currency. I bring my own currency. I am not using your currency. Then I bring my currency. Then I tell you the value of my currency. Then I bring the value of the resources down. And then tell you my currency is valued because my currency is used all over the world. Because you can use my currency and transact business with China, with Russia, with Ukraine, with America, with Europe, with the entire Europe, the entire Africa. So that's how valuable my currency is. So your currency is not valid because you cannot use your currency nowhere. Only my currency. Henceforth, I beat you down. So you're going to sell your resources to me for little of nothing. Africa does not have currency. So to answer your question, in this context of analysis, yes, Danny, Africa have no currency. Let's continue here. Let's continue here. Let's continue. So this whole thing is about protecting your currency. So America have to protect her currency. America have to protect her empire. Because America, we can talk so and talk so. American empire, she herself she know is failing. She herself she know her currency is failing. Let her be real here. Let's continue here.
because the bank is yet to resume cross-border transactions. And this bank is central to their businesses. Like I told you yesterday, Silicon Valley was a top banker for America's tech industry. Also for many venture capitalists, many startups put their first checks in Silicon Valley. The past few days have been a nightmare for them. Here's an American entrepreneur sharing his horror story.
The last 72 hours has been sort of an extreme version of that. I mean, not knowing whether or not the company you've spent 5 years building was going to go away overnight as a result of something as, I think, sort of unpredictable as a collapse of a bank was really hard.
And here's the scariest part. Silicon Valley could be just the tip of the iceberg. America's banking industry at large remains vulnerable. That's because this collapse is linked to US treasuries or US government bonds. Again, we talked about this yesterday. Silicon Valley Bank had a lot of cash. It invested this money in government bonds. But last year, when the US
The NBA is back, and with FanDuel, this season's looking better than ever. Because right now, new customers get
Federal Reserve hiked interest rates, it issued new bonds. These new bonds offered higher interest rates, and that made the old bonds less valuable. Their value declined sharply. And that's a problem for a lot of American banks because many of them still hold the old government bonds. They paid a lot of money for these old bonds. But now if they sell them, they'll not be able to recover that money. In other words, they're sitting on a pile of losses. Do you know how much? Losses worth a whopping $620 billion. This is what American banks are staring at. Over $600 billion in losses. But I must say here, these are unrealized losses, meaning they exist only on paper as of today.
Now, let me add a little bit to it, right? $600 billion. That is just what they put there. But it is possible. That is what she said. It is just on paper, but it is possible. It is more than that $1 billion that she have lost. Okay? So, businesses, all right? Let me tell you the reason why America is holding those companies, finance or money in a bank. What happened here is that in this current time, in this current situation, it's going to be difficult, okay, to compete in a large economy like America. It's going to be difficult to compete in a large economy like America or like Europe. So businesses, what they are doing is they want to take their money out of the bank. They want to take their money out of the bank and go to a smaller economy. There they will function. There they will compete because they won't have a lot of people to compete with them. So if you can notice, in America here, before the year end, a lot of businesses are going to be shut down. In fact, many places in the US have closed down, leading to Canada. Kmart, most of these businesses, they are closing down. Many of them, they are closing their location because they can't make it to pay those employees, and businesses is getting tight. So competing in a large economy like this time is hard for most businesses. So they have to take their money from the bank to go to a smaller economy. As one empire failing, another empire rising. African leaders, open your eye, be mindful, wake up. As one empire failing, another empire rising up. So America hold this money, this company, they hold their money in a bank. You cannot, what America is telling them, you cannot take your money. We are already facing crisis. We are already facing financial crisis and stuff. How are you going to take your money from the bank? We're going to go bankrupt. The value of our currency is already going down. So what most nations want to do, most companies want to do is that take that money from the bank, say the US currency is not yet totally down. It's not like it still has some value. If at this time they can get it out, carry it to a different country where they will be able to compete, they will still make some profit because the US dollar is not yet down. I mean, it's down, but it's not yet down as it's going to be in the near future. So at this time, if company can take their money from the bank, they will still be able to make some profit out of it in different country because They have to go establish business there. So that's why America is holding these, how they call it, this money in the bank. And America is saying, if you have more money, split that money, 250,000, and put it in different bank. Okay, split that money, 250,000 each, and put it into different banks. Does it make sense? If I have 1 million in the bank, then I have to go open different banks. I have to go open different accounts. But this is a bank that I have. I only want to save with one bank. How am I going to open different accounts? Put my information to different places. Put 250,000, 250,000, 250,000, 200. Does it make sense? So that's what America is telling people, because she does not want to lose the money, for the money to leave the country. But that's what happened when you fund in war, when you invest in war. That's what happened. America has spent over $110 billion in Ukraine. Just last year to this year. Over $110 billion on war. And they are asking, in fact, they are telling Ukraine, it is a credit that Ukraine have to pay. Ukraine is not going to pay this money. But you take taxpayer money and you spend it on war. So things are becoming difficult. So let's continue here and see what we're talking about here.
US banks still hold the old bonds. They don't have to sell them immediately. The banks can wait for the value of the bonds to go up. They can choose to sell them only when the value is up. That way they won't make losses. But if they decide to sell the bonds now, there will be suffering. And this is one of the big reasons why everyone is spooked. This is why investors are worried. They fear that the banks would take more losses. So they're dumping their investment. Shares are being dumped across the board. The result is this: global financial stocks have plunged. Banking stocks from Japan to South Korea to Australia and, of course, America are seeing a sea of red. In 2 days, they have lost $465 billion in their market value. In 2 days. The next few days could be tough. The global banking system remains.
Now, like we just said, right? The reason why they are losing is because companies or nations, most nations now are no longer doing business in the US dollars. They are now doing business in other currency. Like I said, Saudi Arabia, they are oil. They are no longer selling it in the US dollar. The Russian oil is no longer being sold in US dollar. So if you want to buy it, it have to be in a Russian dollar. The Chinese, you want to do business with them, it's no longer in US dollar. It have to be in the Russian, the Chinese money or currency. That is what's happening. And we are just looking at the US, but the UK as well. Their economy is cracking. Their palm or whatsoever cracking. That's what's happening. Okay? And the East African nations, all right, are joining the BRICS. Look, there are a lot of things I'm not going to focus. I'm not really going to, because I'm not going to say everything. At the end of the day, we have to keep some for the interest of Africa. All right? Let's continue here.
On the edge. Speaking of which, there may be a shift in.
All right. The next discussion here is not actually part of today's discussion. But however, I want us to look at it. It also play part. All right. I want us to look at it. It also play part. All right. I didn't plan to bring it. But however, let's just look at it. It also play part as well between Israel and the United States. Because Israel is now blaming the U.S. just how many nations around the world have been blaming the U.S. of proxy war. Just how many nations around the world have been blaming the U.S. of manipulating and infiltrating their election, their governmental policy, their local election, all of those things, their affair. Asia today have come out to accuse the United States. What is happening? Because Israel, all right, is the country where the United States, when you're talking about fundings, especially ammunition, Israel is the nation that received the highest recipient of American taxpayer money or data when it comes to military support. When it comes to ammunition, Israel is the nation where American taxpayer go billions of dollars. So yeah, when you see the war in Palestine is not finishing, where do you think Israel getting the support from? What do you think make Israel powerful in our region? What do you think Israel is powerful in our region? Now, for a century, all right, Israel have been adamant. But why it is today, Israel is coming out blaming the United States of interfering. Is it because Israel is getting afraid? Because now the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Iran, all of them, they are teaming up with Russia. Now Israel is isolated. I don't know. That's just my analysis. Let's continue with the video and see.
In Israel's equations with the US. The Netanyahu government is under pressure. Israel is seeing its biggest protest ever, and now the government says it could be America's doing. It's quite a charge, and it came from a top aide of the prime minister. He's given no proof to back his claim, but he set the cat among the pigeons with this one. Let me start with a recap of what's happening in Israel. 500,000 people are out on the streets protesting. They're against the government's controversial judicial reforms. The new rules will give the prime minister a bigger say in picking judges. Remember, he faces cases himself. And this kind of power could give him undue influence over courts. That's what critics say, and people are protesting. Former military chiefs are warning about a possible civil war, but the prime minister is not willing to relent. Protesters say Israel is becoming a dictatorship and that they're out on the streets to protect democracy. Can Netanyahu survive this? 500,000 protesters turning up in a country of 9 million people. That's almost 5% of the country's population out on the streets. It's unprecedented. These protesters are carrying the Israeli flag, chanting slogans like, Israel will not be a dictatorship.
I'm here to demonstrate and to sound my voice against the dictatorship that they are established here in the name of the so-called law, judicial reform. It's not a judicial reform. It's a revolution that's making Israel go to full dictatorship. And I want Israel to stay a democracy for my kids, for my grandson that will be here, because Israel is a democracy country and it must stay as one.
It's a revolution, they say, and it sure looks like one. They're protesting against the prime minister's proposed judicial reform, the one that will give Israel's parliament, the Knesset, the power to overturn Supreme Court decisions with a simple majority. The government will be able to nominate judges. Let me show you the results from a poll conducted last month. 2 out of 3 Israelis believe the Supreme Court should retain the power to strike down laws. That's 66% of all Israelis. Almost the same number of people want the existing system of appointing judges to continue, almost 63% Israelis. But the government sees a foreign hand in this. Netanyahu and his aides believe it is the United States, Israel's top ally and security partner. Reports say Israel's government believes it is funding, the US is funding and orchestrating these anti-Netanyahu protests. I have a quote from a senior Israeli government official. This is what he said. This protest is financed and organized with millions of dollars. We are following what is happening. This is a very high-level organization who finances the transportation, the flags, the stages. It is clear to us. This official was...
All right, so we are not going to play the whole video, right? But like I said, that was not a discussion, but it's just to add to it, okay, with this global crisis going on. Now, that is a huge allegation. Why will, at this time, the United States to be accused by Russia? Israel. Something that you would never even imagine. Now the question then becomes, where is the world leading? Where are we going? Give me 1 minute, folks. So, why will Asia accuse the United States something that you would never imagine, something that you would never hear about? Why is Asia accusing the United States? What goes around come around? They see Asia are the same people who running around, mostly I was saying Africa, creating proxy war, propaganda. What goes around come around? One who led by the sword shall be led by the sword. One who killed by the sword shall be killed by the sword. So today, you are coming around accusing the United States of the United States interfering into your affair. Okay? The United States interfering into your affair. That's a huge allegation. What is the United States going to do? Now, what is happening behind the scene? It could be, I don't know, the prime minister want to join the surrounding nation because the surrounding nation are now forming ally with China. Do you know how heavy it is for China and Russia to join? And then Iran, as we speak, Iran, Saudi Arabia, all these nations coming together. And as we know, Syria already been part of Russia, okay, in collaboration, as we know that. So in our region, maybe Asia is seeing a sign that she have to drop back. Maybe Asia is seeing a sign like, well, we've been led by someone who been misleading us. Thank you for your money. Thank you for your data. But this time, I don't think we want data. Your data can no longer save us. It's a sign. I don't know. I'm just speaking. But could it be a sign that your data can no longer save us? Because these are nations that are coming together and they're going to be powerful and you can't save us. Because Ukraine, nobody can save Ukraine as we speak. So we got to protect ourselves. Keep your dollar, keep your money. African leaders, open your mind and listen and pay attention. It's not about the data. It's not about the data. So pay attention what is going on in the world. Nations are drifting and seeking to go where they can go. If today Asia can accuse the United States, bravo, bravo, bravo. So that means everything we've been saying about the United States, all our nations have been saying about the United States, okay. So now Asia is accusing the United States now. That's good. Good. Very good. Asia, continue. We want more news. In fact, we might report on this maybe in the near future. We want more news. Bring something. But let's continue to the topic. It's not about Asia. Let's continue to the topics. Now, let's go back to climate change. Was climate change a scam over the scramble for Africa? Let's go to the next evidence again, as to where actually President Biden. Now, we have seen one reason why the United States turned around and forgot about climate change. Because the tactics of climate change to get Africa and African resources, it did not work. So then, what was the next option that Biden took? Follow me. Let's see here. Okay? And see what is happening in the world with all various nations. And then see where the dollar is today. Okay? Follow me. Let's see here. let's see this. Let's see if that's it. Okay, good. All right. So before the video play, right, I'm gonna read something here and then see, and then I'll allow the video to play. I'm not gonna allow the entire video to play because it's like 43 minutes. But I'm gonna read here. I'm gonna read certain paragraph here, and then allow the video to play, and then we emphasize on it and move on because I will not allow it to play for 43 minutes. We don't have time. All right. So let's see here. So let's see here. Okay. So it says BRICS, BRICS, the same BRICS we're talking about, right? Now, BRICS include like Russia, South Africa, Brazil, part of African nation like the East, from the East. I don't think any West African nation is part of BRICS as for now. All right. Yeah, I don't think any West African nation is part of BRICS. So again, that's why I said the 1963 Casablanca and the Moravia Group. That's what happening on the African continent right now. African leaders are not even paying attention. Okay, they're just going by the breeze. Okay, they're just going wherever the breeze blow, they all go there. But it's very simple, and we're going to come to the solution that African leaders are not looking at. All right, let's continue here. It says BRICS challenges U.S. dollar dominance. Saudi Arabia now. Saudi consider selling oil in other currencies. The U.S. unipolar era is over, says economics Zotat Poza. BRICS is developing a fairer system of monetary exchange to challenge the dominance of the dollar. South Africa revealed Saudi Arabia is considering selling oil in other currency by Ben Norton, Geopolitical Economy Report. And the link is also there. So it said BRICS Saudi dollar payment or BRICS Saudi dollar payment or China. Photo. Now, BRICS summit in 2014 left and Chinese President Xi Jinping meet with the Arab League in Saudi Arabia in December 2022. The international economic system had been dominated for decades by the United States, but this financial architecture is rapidly fracturing with creation of new institutions in the global south. The BRICS blocks of Brazil, Russia, India. Okay, like we said, India. So India is not. So it's like, look. Okay, let's continue here. The BRICS block of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa is working to develop a fairer system of monetary exchange to challenge the dominance of the dollar. South Africa foreign minister has revealed Saudi Arabia publicly confirmed that it is considering selling its oil in other currency, not in the US dollar. So you see, from the first video we watched, why the US is holding the United States currency, because she does not want for a company to take it. Because what happened here is company will take this money and go invest in the oil. Will take this money and go change it and go invest in oil or do different investment in different country. So that means companies are leaving the US. So go to different nations. That is why most companies in the United States, more businesses are closing down. As it's closing down, they are taking the money to different countries. The US dollar is growing. The US empire is growing. Let's continue here. So you see what is happening. You see the layout here. Do you think the United States, they already know this? They're going to see this and sit down and back and just, okay, we will see what's going to happen. So she's fighting as well. Let's continue here. China President Xi Jinping said Beijing will buy energy from the Persian Gulf state in its own currency. Again, not in the US dollar again. In its own currency, in the Chinese currency, the renminbi. So you hear it. Okay? Let's continue here. Prominent economist Zota Poza of the Swiss investment bank, Credit Suisse, has observed that unipolar era of the US hegemony is quickly being replaced with a new multipolar order of one war, two system. One war, two system. Okay, unlike the United States, one war order, one system, one war, one system. But let's continue here. China is proactively writing a fresh set of rules and creating a new type of globalism. Poza wrote, describing how this transition threatening the exorbitant privilege that the dollar holds as the international international reserve currency. Now, a meeting of the head of state of the BRICS bloc in 2014, BRICS worked to develop a fair system of monetary exchange as alternative to dominate of the dollar. So I will stop here and then we'll play the video a little bit, okay, and see then what is going on. So you see, first of all, you see what is going on here. You see the fighting that is going on here, right? So nations are no longer or will no longer be traded in the US dollar. Nobody want to be under the US because they feel that the US is oppressive, or the imperialists, they are oppressive, they are suppressive. Okay? It is not about mutual agreement or fair share, okay, or to listen to one side. It's superior and subordinate. Let's see the video here. Let's see. So when you see Joe Biden talking about making a U-turn, right, and talking about drilling the pipeline or the oil in America here, is to bring back the value of a dollar and to bring back her economy. It's for her too to be able to get into the business to sell her oil into her currency. Because if she don't do that, she failed to do that, there is nothing to sell. Because right now, nations are showing their power with their resources. Nations are showing their power with what they have. I don't know about Africa. I don't know. We're going to get to Africa. The dumbest continent. Very dumb. But nation, I'm sorry to say, but yes, we will say in this content. All right? Nations are showing their power with the resources they have. They are showing their power with the resources they have. But Africa, I don't know. We stay dumb. We have not yet realized the power that we have. We have not yet realized that we have resources that we can dominate the world as well. We have not yet realized, because we want to be individual nation. We want to be divided. Yeah. We are so proud of being Nigerian. We are so proud of being Liberian. We are so proud of being Ghanaian. We are so proud of being Togolese. Nonsense.
Saudi Arabia and Iran. These are two countries in West Asia, the so-called Middle East, that did not even have formal diplomatic relations for 7 years. They were basically at war with each other, and the United States had been pressuring Saudi Arabia to join it in its so-called maximum pressure campaign against Iran, which really amounts to a kind of hybrid war or unconventional war against Iran. Now, Saudi Arabia and Iran have signed peace talks, and China is talking about further helping to integrate Asia and especially working toward increasing their economic ties. And today I'm going to talk about how this can be a geopolitical game changer. And not only in terms of helping to bring peace to West Asia, the so-called Middle East, which is a region that has suffered from constant US wars and destabilization and intervention, but even more significantly, in my view, is what this means for oil and specifically the petrodollar. Since the 1970s, the vast majority of oil in the global market has been sold in US dollars. And this has been one of the ways in which the US has been able to maintain the hegemony of the US dollar after removing its links to gold in 1971 with the Richard Nixon shock. And the way that the US pressured Saudi Arabia to sell oil around the world in dollars was a way that the US could maintain economic hegemony. But now we've seen that China, Iran, and Saudi Arabia are all countries that have talked about selling oil in other currencies, not only the Chinese currency, the renminbi, but other currencies as a way of challenging the hegemony of the US dollar and US economic imperialism. Now, in addition to the massive economic repercussions of this deal, we can also see that this is part of the global drive toward multipolarity. And of course, China is one of the founding members of the BRICS system, that is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And both Iran and Saudi Arabia have formally applied to join the BRICS bloc. That means that now that Iran and Saudi Arabia have formal diplomatic relations, I don't expect them to be friends with each other, but as long as they're not at war with each other, this means that they can be integrated into the BRICS. The BRICS bloc can be expanded. Iran has already become a member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization as well. This includes China, Russia, India, Pakistan, Central Asian states. It represents more than 40% of the global population and more than 1/3 of the world's GDP. And in addition to Iran joining, Saudi Arabia is an official dialogue partner of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and has expressed interest in joining as well. So what this all shows is that China is helping to facilitate unity all across Asia. This has sometimes been referred to as Eurasian integration because Russia's involved. But as we see with the proxy war in Ukraine, Russia has been basically kicked out of Europe. So I think it's a much more accurate way of describing it as Asian integration. And we see that China is at the heart of this, encouraging this so that there can be stability all across Asia. So economically, they can develop together and integrate and challenge the hegemony of the US and Europe that have dominated the global economy since the rise of European colonialism. Now, in a lot of the analysis that I've seen in the media discussing the normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran, there's been a lot of discussion of what this means for the region itself, but very little discussion of what I think is the most important factor, which is energy, oil and gas. It goes without saying that Saudi Arabia for decades has been one of the world's largest producers of oil. It is consistently among the top 3 largest producers, along with the US and Russia. And Brazil and Iran are also consistently within the top 10 largest producers of oil in the world. Now, Brazil and Russia and China, which is also consistently in the top 10 producers of oil in the world, currently it's number 5. Brazil, Russia, and China are already part of the BRICS system. If Iran and Saudi Arabia also join the BRICS, and Iraq has expressed interest in the BRICS as well, that means that more than half of the top 10 largest oil producers in the world are going to become part of the BRICS bloc. Furthermore, Saudi Arabia is the de facto leader of OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, which basically controls the price of oil on the global market. And Russia is part of the extended OPEC Plus alliance. So that means that if Saudi Arabia and Iran can join the BRICS is basically going to become a larger affiliate of OPEC. And that means that the global commodities markets are going to be basically determined by the BRICS system, because not only are they energy powerhouses, but these are countries that also produce other minerals. In the case of Brazil, Brazil is one of the world's largest producers of iron ore. So we're talking about BRICS becoming the world commodities superpower. And BRICS is already discussing ways to do trade in new currencies and South Africa has revealed that BRICS is working on creating a new global reserve currency to get off the US dollar. So what this means is that BRICS could very soon be challenging the dollar in global trade and could fundamentally not only unseat the petrodollar itself, but simply the hegemony of the US dollar as the global reserve currency and the currency used in around 80% of international trade. So let's look at the official declaration from the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They published a press release on March 10th that announced that the top Chinese diplomat Wang Yi had shared a meeting in Beijing of peace talks between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and they were successful. Now, this is very important because there had been attempts at holding peace talks between Saudi Arabia and Iran previously in Iraq, and they failed, largely because the US government under Donald Trump murdered the top Iranian official, Qasem Soleimani, who had been overseeing those peace talks in Iraq. So those peace talks failed because the US sabotaged them. And these peace talks, sponsored by China in Beijing, in which the US was not even involved in any way, represents this new multipolar world we're in, where the US is no longer the world's global hegemon, where it decides what's going to happen all around the world. China is helping to negotiate peace in West Asia and other regions, and they don't want the US to be meddling and to be involved and destroying and sabotaging these peace processes. Now, if you look at what the Chinese Foreign Ministry said, they made a very important comment that China is a reliable friend of both Saudi Arabia and Iran. That is important because it shows that Saudi Arabia doesn't want to have to choose between one of these two powers. The US was trying to force Iran into the camp of China and Russia and to maintain Saudi Arabia in its camp. The US has been trying to divide up the world into bipolar blocks as part of a new Cold War, forcing countries to pick a side. And Iran, of course, is under illegal US sanctions and has been since the Iranian Revolution in 1979. But Saudi Arabia has historically been a US ally. Yet we see in the past few years that Saudi Arabia has been looking toward the east and is now maintaining basically non-aligned policies, basically as part of the non-aligned movement. Saudi Arabia is balancing the West against the so-called East. And this is yet another example of this. And now China doesn't have to choose one or the other. China can be an ally of both of them. Now, Wang Yi, the top Chinese diplomat, said the improvement of relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran has paved the way for realizing peace and stability in the Middle East. And this is a really important quote. And he's clearly referencing the history of US and European meddling in this region. He says, China supports countries in the Middle East in upholding strategic autonomy, strengthening solidarity and cooperation, getting rid of external interference, and really holding the future of the Middle East in their own hands. So in a diplomatic way, that is China referencing obliquely the very recent history of constant US wars, destabilizing the region, invading countries. The US military is still occupying Syria, the large oil reserves and wheat areas in Syria, preventing the Syrian government from getting revenue from oil that it needs to rebuild the country after a decade of proxy war. This is a proxy war that was fueled by the conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran, with Saudi Arabia supporting Salafi jihadist rebels fighting, backed by the CIA, fighting against the Syrian government, and Iran supporting the Syrian government. So now China has come in and helped to negotiate peace and said, look, you all should maintain stability in this region. We don't want to destabilize the region, unlike the United States, which has destabilized this region for decades. And before that, European colonial powers colonized this region, going back to Sykes-Picot, the agreement in World War I, when the European colonial powers carved up the former Ottoman Empire, and France and Britain handed themselves on a map. They picked what regions of West Asia they would like to colonize. So this is China saying that this region is sovereign and we need no more external interference. We need peace and stability and development. Now, in its press release, the Chinese Foreign Ministry didn't mention energy, But clearly, that is one of the most important factors in this peace deal. And for a decade now, China has been the largest purchaser of energy from West Asia, not the United States. A decade ago, China replaced the United States. And China is the largest trading partner for Saudi Arabia. And China is the largest importer of oil in the entire world. Now, in addition to oil, gas is increasingly important as a global source of energy. And of course, the Persian Gulf region is one of the world's largest producers of gas. The US is the world's biggest producer of gas, but also Russia is the second biggest, and Iran is the third biggest. And China is Iran's largest trading partner, in addition to being Saudi Arabia's largest trading partner. And China is one of the world's largest importer of gas as well, especially liquefied natural gas. And Qatar is tied with the United States as the world's biggest producer and exporter of liquefied natural gas. So once again, we see that Asia economically is integrating and becoming increasingly autonomous economically. They don't need the meddling in the input of the West. China gets more than 1/3 of.
All right, so I can't play the whole video. It's about 43 minutes long. Let me see if I can paste it here. I don't know if you guys will see it. If anybody want it, they can get it from that and listen to it. But again, now let me just add to this. So you see, like I said, the West African nation, right? None of them are on these BRICS. All right, none of them yet. But now, just from what you saw in the video here, right? Listen to this. Do you know why the Nigerian election went the way it went? It was manipulated. All right. Now, this is my own perspective. I'm not saying that's true. All right. I believe if Peter Obi was going to be given the seat, and I know he won the election, if he was going to be given the seat, Peter Obi, Nigeria being one of the largest producer of oil or gas in the world, right? Imagine Nigeria joining the BRICS. Now, let me make this clear. I am not saying African nations should join the BRICS. It's still a big mistake. I mean, as a nation in Africa, you can become part of the BRICS. It's useless. It's like an African nation becoming part of NATO. You still don't have power. It's still useless. It's like an African nation becoming part of an EU or the G7. It's useless. Or the G20 is useless. You have no power. So African nation being part of BRICS is still useless. Why? We don't have currency. Even though they are saying the BRICS nations are coming out with a currency, right? They are coming out, but it's not yet real. So I don't know if the Chinese going to lead their currency or the Russian or the Saudi Arabia. I don't know about that. But even if they come out with a currency, it's still going to be useless to the African continent with the resources. At the end of the day, even with the BRICS, it's still going to have hierarchy. And a hierarchy is not going to be an African man. The hierarchy is going to be different person, going to be different nationality, going to be from different country. So where is the position of Africa? Where is the vision of Africa? Instead of African leaders coming together, they are busy running, being part of foreign entity or foreign organization. Being part of the BRICS nation is nothing beneficial to Africa, but rather it gives edge to China over the US. You are just empowering. That is not to say I want you to no. Being African nation, being part of BRICS, is just giving edge over China, China, how they call it, edge with. You just putting China in a position of where China is going to be over the US. It's the same scramble for Africa. That's the scramble for Africa. So you're giving power to China over the US. You giving power to Russia over the US and not even realizing it. It's the scramble for Africa. It is the scramble for Africa being used differently and using Africans. How can we allow people to keep using us like this? We all know Africa being part of the G Summit is useless. We all know Africa being part of G7 or even NATO is useless. It's the same as being part of the BRICS. It's useless. African leaders, open your ears, your mind, open it. No one will save Africa, and no organization outside of Africa will save Africa. There is no nation will save Africa, will liberate Africa. No nation. You can go join Russia, it will not save you. You can join China, it will not save you. You can join Asia, it will not save you. You can join EU, it will not save you. You join US, it will not save you. Do you know how many military on the African continent? Do you know how many African soldiers? Do you know how many Marines on the African continent? Do you know how many navies on the African continent? But still they can't solve Africa. They can't solve African people problem. We have proxy war. Every day Africans are dying. Can't you think? You have Marines proliferating on the African continent. They lie to you. They say we bring our army. We form African so that we will help fight jihadi. We will help fight terrorists. We will fight the enemies. Who are the enemies? The same people come and recruit Africans and give them ammunition and make them terrorists and make them jihadis, make them ISIS. The same people come and create your own people, train them, give them gun, make them terrorists. Kill your people. Then we sit down there and say, American army come and save us. How many American army proliferating on the African continent? They are not still saving us. Nobody can save us. All of these things, we see example. We see it every day. And we still sit down, we think by becoming part of a foreign organization or entity is going to save us. It's going to liberate us. Nothing will save African. Nothing. Other than African uniting. Other than you so-called African leaders. Stupidity. If you guys can come together. If you guys can unite. And combine the African continent. Or put the African nations together. As it was before the 1600. We are doomed for destruction. That is why they infiltrated the Nigerian election. Because Nigeria being one of the largest producers of oil in the world. Imagine Nigeria turning her back from the US. Imagine Nigeria turning her back from UK. While we have all these resources, the richest continent in the world, but become the poorest continent in the world because of our stupidity. That is why they even store our artifacts. They have it in UK, in Belgium, in France, in US. But they say they cannot give all these artifacts because we can't take care of it. They are right. They are right. We cannot take care of it. How are we going to produce something you stole from us? You stole it from us. How did we take care of it before you stole it from us? But they are right when they say they don't want to return those artifacts because we will not take care of it. You know why? You know why they are right? Because we're stupid. After the colonize or the enslave or the stole from or the dehumanize or they loot our resources, we fight for independence from the same people. Then we go to them and ask them how democracy look like. How does democracy work? Stupidity. That is why they say no African leader can lead Africa. There is no leader in Africa. And they are right when they say there is no leader in Africa. Because we cannot take care of our own people. We take our money and carry to European banks and carry to the Bank of Barclays, the Colonial Bank in UK, and put the money there. We take our bank and kind of put it into Wachovia, how they call it, Bank of America, SBB Bank, all these colonial bank, we bring our money, put it there. You cannot build hospital in Africa, but you take 50 millions for one trip when you get sick and come to America, go to UK and spend 50 million. You send your children to come and ride the best of car, the Ferrari, the Bugatti, the Bugatti, everything. Why your people in Africa suffer and die? That is what I said. African leaders are not fit because they are not thinking. They still run to a colonial master for direction. You have an election. You allow your colonial master, you Nigeria, to come and dictate to you. To come and dictate to you. So now you understand why the way they infiltrated the Nigeria election. They were sitting there as observer. I saw one lady, Stacey Abraham, another Negro in America here, who have done nothing for our people in America here. How can she be an observer on an election in Africa, in Nigeria? What have she done for African in America that she's going to do for African in Africa? I saw her sitting there as an observer in Nigeria. And I saw Nigeria, they were respecting her like, oh my gosh, what has she done for Africa in America here? And we allow them to infiltrate the election. Nigeria have taken Africa back for another 50 years from this election. Nigeria. It did not just affect Nigeria, it affected the entire West African nation. It infected the entire African nation. Nigeria, what you did. You did not just do it to the people in Nigeria, but you did it to the other African nations. You did it to us. You saw the election for your selfish interests. So you want to be slave. You want to continue to be slave. You don't want to empower. You don't want to be self-determined continent or a self-determined nation. And you took the election, you gave it to somebody because somebody said give it to somebody to protect somebody's interests. Why are you people still protecting Western people's interests? It's not about the West no more. It's about Africa. Look at the number of people in Nigeria in poverty. Look at the number of people in Africa in poverty. When we are saying West Africa superpower, Nigeria, we are not just saying that because we want to say it. We are saying that because we depend on you. We are saying that because we depend on you to bring those African nations together. But you sit down there to protect the imperialists, the colonizer, the people who enslave you, colonize you, dehumanize you, kill you, torture you, disrespect you, call you a shithole continent. Call you a shithole nation. And then we still listen to them. And we don't think about our people. We don't think about our nations, our continent. Nobody can save us. If you think America will come and save you, you damn lie. America will not save you. America will not die for you. If you think Europe will come and save you, you damn lie. Europe will not save you. Europe will not die for you. Russia will not save you. Russia will not die for you. China will not save you. China will not die for you. Only African can die for African. How long are we going to die for other nationality? How long are we going to die for other people and they can't die for us? Only African in this world can die for other people. But they can never die for themselves. They can never invest in themselves, but they'll invest in other people for other people to take advantage of them. Complete nonsense. Let's continue here. What is our position? What is our position in this new scramble? What is the vision for Africa in this new scramble? Are we going to take Africa and give it to the West and give it to the imperial and the colonizer to save them? And then after they are saved, then tomorrow they come and look down on us and call us stupid and call us third world country and call us shithole and spit on us? And then after we save them, they'll close their border. They'll close their border and they tell us not to come. They'll close their border when we have saved them. You got to save yourself first before you save anybody. You got to save yourself first before you save anybody. Let's see something here. Let's see something here. Let's continue with what is going on in the world. Let's continue with what is going on. Okay? Let's continue with the crackdown of the dollar, the crackdown of the empire.
International signs that the empire is falling. The U.S. wanted a uniform condemnation and sanctions against Russia for invading Ukraine. When Biden called an African summit to get uniform support for condemning Russia, just a little under half of the countries in Africa refused to do that. They abstained from anything like that. 35 nations in the U.S. didn't join the U.S. in condemning Russia for invading Ukraine. And that's because the U.S. is no longer calling all the shots. Our empire is beginning to fall. When the U.S. called for a worldwide boycott of Russian oil and gas, the majority of the world's population, that is, the people in India and the people in China, refused. Instead, they are importing vast amounts of Russian national gas and oil and selling them at a higher price, contributing to the inflation. Only Europe went along with the United States, in spite of many demonstrations by its people. In another sign, the Saudis, who always obediently went along with the U.S., refused to increase oil production. When the U.S. asked that they increase oil production to get prices down, they basically told our government to pound sand, forget it. Even the U.S. oil and gas companies refused our government's request to lower their prices. And of course, the U.S. has its ample supplies of oil and gas. There was no reason to increase the prices except greed, and the U.S. oil and gas companies decided to join the foreign gas and oil companies and raise their prices and refused Biden. That's because they don't have to listen the way they used to. In 1971, then President Nixon called a price freeze because inflation was getting out of control. He called a wage and price freeze, and the penalty for disobeying was immediate imprisonment. The inflation stopped. The corporations listened to the government. The U.S. was at its height. It was capitalist greed that shaped this loss. How does that work? Why did the fall of the American empire have to do with capitalist greed? Well, the US corporations decided in the late 70s that now the technology enabled them to export jobs, now that there were faxes and computers and fast jet travel, they could export their manufacturing to countries with low wages and no ecological protections and pensions and sick days. All those things that unionized American workers fought for, they could evade. China had the most disciplined workforce, and most of those jobs, millions of manufacturing jobs, went to China, whose wages are higher than the others at $3.19 an hour, but nonetheless far short of the over $30 that American workers fought for, and with no protection. So this was an enormous boon for the profits of greedy American companies. They then took the money, the billions they were acquiring, and came back and bought our government, since we have no limits on campaign spending, unlike the rest of Europe, Scandinavia, and other nations. We allowed campaign corporations to buy our government. Also, the US, unlike our European counterparts, did not have a strong enough socialist, communist, other left parties. The McCarthy era wiped them out. So they didn't create laws along with the unions to stop outsourcing. Those penalties exist across Europe and Scandinavia, but not in the United States. So Americans became immiserated. Manufacturing jobs were converted to service jobs, which were the jobs more given to women and therefore lower paid. Unions atrophied. The United States empire is falling. There's every sign. And what the United States is doing to counteract that can be seen in funding the war in Ukraine, because the war in Ukraine, according to Biden's own words, is created to exhaust Russia and to use NATO to exhaust Russia. Russia has the most natural resources in the world. China has the most people. China and Russia are now in an alliance. They are close allies in BRICS, which is an economic rival to the US influence in the economies of the BRICS countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, with 12 countries that want to enter BRICS and be part of it. So that one way the United States is trying to regain its dominance is to knock out Russia through the Ukraine, so that we become more dominant, and to use NATO for that purpose, and thus the war in Ukraine, to which the American government, with our passive okay, has allowed $100 billion to be given to that effort. I should say, because it's important to note, that $50 billion would inject every single person in the whole world with enough vaccinations to stop COVID. That's half of what we gave to the war in Ukraine with Americans' passive.
All right. So again, we see it from the analysis, okay, in there again, which relate to the question: was climate change? Let me answer this call quick. Okay, was climate change a scheme in the scramble for Africa? Indeed, it was a scheme. Because it came a time, like she said, America asked African nations to go against Russia. And African nations, most of them extend themselves, and some of them voted against America to go against Russia. Right? So these imperialists, they always have different tactics to get Africa. So what they did, they created another thing called climate change. You see it? And with that climate change, it did not still work. What did they do? The Americans start putting in that, okay, we want for Africa to join the G20. America. So in Africa joining the G20, what does that mean? Absolutely. Who still have the power? The US. It's just like NATO. Then the US win against Russia. Now, for so long, Africans have been asking to have a permanent seat in the UN. And they see US and Europe being against it. In fact, when Africans are about to speak, they see US and they see Europe will walk out of the house while Africans are speaking. Then the moment US or Europe about to speak, the entire house get populated. But then it was the CUS started advocating for Africa to have a permanent seat in the UN. After a century or decade, Africa been advocating, Russia been advocating for Africa to have permanent seat, but they see US and they see UK, they see Europe step on Africa's neck, step on our neck and say we can have permanent seat. But after the scramble for Africa, when they told Africans to go against Russia, and Africans said no, because America have never been in our interest, Europe have never been in our interest, all of a sudden, boom. America said, okay, then we need Africa to have permanent seat on the UN. We want Africa to be part of the G Summit. Take a break. Since when? So you see the scramble for Africa, how it been playing out. So what the United States and UK are doing right now is they are going to individual nations and talking to them, making treaty with them, because they have core African nations in gatherings, in groups, and it did not work. So they are going to nation, they are going to lead us individually, one by one, calling them, convincing them to come on their side. Because they have tried to do it holistically, it ain't happen. They have tried to call meeting, it ain't happen. So they are going one by one. They are calling African leaders one by one to come. That's what happened with Nigeria. You see it? But what Africans fail to realize is, it's not about being part of America, or it's not about being part of Europe. It's not about being part of, look, the solution to African problem is you so-called nigger-headed African leaders. I will say this, I'm sorry. It's just too much and we can't bear it no more. Why do you continue to be dummy and dummy and dummy? The solution here is you people come together. Have your African summit in Africa. Let all the head of state come together. Oh, the thing is just simple, man. Now, let me make this before I come back to you African leaders. Let me say something. Let me put a charger that is dying. Let me put the computer on charge. Now, the lady says something, right? What does he say? Anyway, it slipped up. But let's come to this. The solution to African people, but now we should know it. African leaders, stop running, coming to US, going to UK, going to Asia, going to China, going to Saudi Arabia. It's all vanity. It's vanity. It's vanity. Lack of knowledge, my people perish. Lack of knowledge, my people perish. It's vanity. The solution to African problem is you African leaders come together. Come together. America know it. America know the solution to Africa. UK know the solution. Europe know the solution to Africa. They know it. And that solution is for you African leaders to come together. Now, the lady said Russia is the richest nation in the world, right? Now, when you're talking about a nation, she could be saying the truth, but I don't think Russia is the richest. We got DRC Congo. DRC Congo. That's what she know. Yeah, okay. But we got DRC Congo. But African leaders, if you guys can come together, the entire continent is rich. If you guys can just come together and just unite and forget about Liberia, Nigeria, Senegal, Ghana, Guinea, Gambia, and Mali, this, that, because it's suffering us. It is suffering us. We are dying on the African continent. We are dying because the leaders lack visions. The leaders don't have position for the African people. All nations in the world as we speak have their position. All nations in the world as we speak have their vision. But African leaders do not have position and they do not have vision as we speak. They think that their vision is to go become big part of BRICS. They think that their vision is to be part of the US. They think their vision is to be part of UK. That's a failed vision. That vision is to uplift US, is to uplift UK, but it's not to uplift African. That vision is to bring African down. It's to put Africa in utter poverty. That vision. The African vision is, what do we want? The African vision is to come together. Do you know since the Ukraine war started, do you know how many billions of dollars US has spent in Ukraine? Do you know how many ammunition, supply, vehicles that US have sent in Ukraine? How many ammunition or vehicles the US have given to the DRC Congo military to fight the M23 rebel? But rather, these imperialists are the one funding the rebels. They are the one funding the terrorists. Why can the US go give money to Russia if Russia is the terrorist? Why can't they go give ammunition to Russia if Russia is the terrorist? Because that is what these foreigners do in Africa. They supply the terrorists. They supply the rebels to create proxy war so that we can be in poverty, so that they can continue to loot our resources. And we still run to them to come and tell us what democracy look like. To come and tell us what freedom look like. How can the rebels get vehicles in Africa? The rebels get modern weapons. And in fact, the modern weapon they use in Ukraine, that's what the terrorists have in Africa. But the military, the African military do not have it. The Congolese military do not have it, but the rebels have it. How can a rebel have modern weapons that they are using in Ukraine? But the soldiers do not have it. America failed to protect Mali. When Mali brought France to the UN and said France is operating the Malian airspace and supporting the terrorists with ammunition, UN did nothing, but rather UN went and started blaming Mali of killing her own citizens. Why can't they carry ammunition and give it to the Malian army? But when the Russian gave aircraft, helicopter to the Malian army to fight the terrorists, the same French use their drones. The way they start bumping the aircraft Russia gave to the Malian to fight the enemies. Africa, African leaders, we will not liberate. We will not go anywhere. You guys will die and go under the ground 6 feet without doing nothing on the African continent. And we will crush you guys. We will crush you. We will crush you, and we will now remember you people. We will crush you people because you people failed to do the right thing. We will crush any African leader who failed to do the right thing. We will crush you, and we will never remember you. You will never be part of our ancestors that we will talk to. You will never be part of Nkrumah. You will never be part of Jomo Kenyatta. You will not be part of Marco X. You will never be part of Amika Cabral. You will not be part of Thomas Sankara. You will never be part of Patrick Lumumba. Because those people died for a cause. You are not dying for a cause. When you die, we will not remember you. What is wrong with you people? And tomorrow they say United States will be pointing finger at Nigeria and say Nigerian leaders are stupid. They will do it. Tomorrow they say United States and UK going to write book and talk about the 2023 Nigeria election, how it was fraudulent, how they were stupid, how they rigged the election. They will say all kind of nasty thing about you people in Nigeria there. Stupidity. They're not going to say we asked the Nigerian people to rig the election in America favor or in UK favor in order to save the UK economy or in order to save the United States economy. They won't say that, but they will write a book and they say you people are dumb and stupid. And the next generation of Nigeria will come and read it. And they will believe what the US will say. They will believe what the UK will say. They will say, but our leader, they were stupid and dumb. All they did was corruption, corruption, corruption. You allow Westerners to come and tell you to be corrupt. And then they will write their book and they say you are corrupt. And your children will come and read the book and they believe that you are corrupt. Stupidness. Stupidness. Complete stupidness. You allow people to use you and then come and write book and use you in our book and go make money. How long these people will make money out of us? They use us, make their money, we save them, and then write their book and then make all those stupid dummy in their book. And then they make millions of dollars out of that book again. And your own children come and read our book and say, but our forefathers were corrupt. My grandfather was corrupt. Our leader have been corrupt. Because that is what they want to read in our book. Because that's the colonial doctrine. And then you know what they're going to say? But our forefather came. Our father came. Our great-grandfather came. They did not save Nigeria. They did what they could do. I'm going to do the same thing. They didn't save Nigeria. I'm the one coming to save Nigeria. They didn't save Africa. I'm not the one coming to save Africa. Hey, I'm going to do my own too. I'm going to get my own money. I'm going to build my own empire and care less to do with the rest of the people. African leaders, What is your vision? What is your position for Africa? Oh, what is your position for Africa? You African leaders. Because this is not about America. Like I said, today's discussion, I don't care. It's not about America. It's not about Europe. It's not about Asia. It's not about China. They are doing what they are doing to save themselves. They are doing what they are doing to save their economy. They are doing what they are doing to save their empire. They are doing what they are doing to save their currency, their dollar. But what are you doing? What are you doing, Africans? Let's continue to the next one. Let's see another video here. We almost get into the conclusion. Bear with me. Let's see another video here. People screaming and shouting. The imperialists screaming and shouting over one another. Because they see their empire scrambling. They're confused. As we are confused too. But our own, the confusion is too stupidity. Our own is complete madness, complete stupidity. Now, this was a gathering here, okay? And this man, he's called Dan Pinner. And they were asking a question about climate change, his view about climate change. But this is why imperialist democracy look like. They don't allow their people to think outside of the box. Listen to this.
Okay.
I got a few, Bob. Yeah.
Okay.
Viewer discussion advised, because what you're about to watch is very explicit, okay? So, okay. It's very explicit.
You support Trump? You do?
Yep.
Okay.
I was one of the first endorsers, public endorsers of President Trump.
What are you guys going to do when our ocean level rises?
Thank you for asking that question. I have the answer.
Don't let me finish.
I have the answer.
Let me finish.
Well, thank you for the question. Yeah. Okay.
For the first time on Earth, we're changing the gas.
Now you're full of shit. Sit down. I'm going to answer you. I'm going to answer. Just
Dad.
shut up and shut up and sit down.
No way.
Sit down.
No. I got to finish my question.
I'm going to answer global warming.
All right, finish the question, then answer.
It's changing on Earth, and it's changing to CO2. What do you people with the money, what are you doing about this? Because
I'm going to tell you right now.
No, I've got children. I've got 21, 23-year-old children. And what's their future with you people with money? You talk about money all of the time.
Okay. Sit down, please. Sit down, please. In the front row. Excuse me. In the front row. Please sit down. Okay, you've asked your question. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm gonna answer.
Excuse me, ma'am. Will you please sit down?
And
please.
Thank you.
That's okay. Please sit down. Let him answer.
Okay. In 2011, my wife and I were in Antarctica, renewing our vows. For most of you that don't know, Antarctica is on a mountaintop. Okay. And there is a $500 million facility, scientific facility there. And the scientists came to give us presentations about global warming. And they had cores of ice that they had drilled. They had drilled 4,000 or 5,000 cores, and they only brought 15 or 20. So they're going through the second or third core, and they said 275,000 years ago, this was the temperature, blah, 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 blah. And then 55,000 years ago, the world was 2 degrees warmer Celsius than it is today. This is 2011. And stop. And he said, and I said, well, you mean the whole world? He says, yeah. Came to give us presentations about global warming. And they had cores of ice that they had drilled. they had drilled 4,000 or 5,000 cores and they only brought 15 or 20. So they're going through the second or third core, and they said 275,000 years ago, this.
All right. So, like I said, from the beginning of this video or this teaching today, I said, I am not saying there's no global warming or there is no climate change. Okay? But 1,000 years ago, human activities as it is today, it was never at that time, 1,000 years ago. Humans were not even cultivating the land as it is today, right? But there was global warming. There was climate change. Okay? There was global warming, there was climate change that caused to the death of millions of animals. There are some animals today, they are history, like dinosaurs. We don't even know when it existed, right? But they said millions of years ago, 1,000 years ago, dinosaurs existed. But there was global warming and they got killed, right? Human activities at that time was never anywhere near as compared to today. There was still global warming, right? So this is what this man is asking. This man is answering. There was global warming. Back then, there was no human activity as it compared today, as it is compared today. But there was global warming. Okay? So could it be that what happened 1,000 years ago is happening in this time? And we are not paying attention. We keep saying it's human activities. Let's continue this.
This was the temperature, blah, 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 blah. And then 55,000 years ago, the world was 2 degrees warmer Celsius than it is today. This is 2011. And stop. And he said, and I said, well, you mean the whole world? He says, yes. And the poles are only benchmarks. And I said, well, what about the things the young woman alluded to? Okay. And he said, it's all cyclical. And although the gas may have exacerbated it, in the cosmos of time, it's not a fart in the wind. In the cosmos of time, of the 13.8 billion years that we've been on this miserable planet, it's not a fart in the wind. And as I told Joe Rogan on his show, and he said in his infinite wisdom, and Joe, if you hear this, I thank you for the opportunity to be on your show. He said, then in 25,000 years, it's most likely not going to be a problem. Now, my direct answer to your question, if that were really true, which you believe, and let's just for a moment say that it is true. That means that the best scenario vis-a-vis global warming is about 10 feet raise in water. That's the best scenario over the next 40, 50 years. That's the best scenario. The worst scenario is about 100 feet. Well, let's just take the 10 feet. If the water on the planet is going to rise up 10 feet, that means the southern part of the United States is gone. England is gone. Most of Europe is gone. And I can go, most of Central America is gone. Okay. If that's the case, let's just take Florida, for example, which is one of the fastest growing beachfront condominiums on the planet. In the prospectus, when you invest, there should be, in the footnotes, if global warming is for real, they won't put it that way, global warming happens and water rises 10 feet, this investment you made is fuck all. Not one single investment prospectus written since 2000, this century, has alluded to global warming. Not one motherfucker. If it were really true, the banks wouldn't invest. The banks wouldn't finance. Not one motherfucking condominium. So the people that have the money, and I'm jealous of the Vice President, Gore, which Sally and I rode on a plane from South America with a few years ago. I am jealous he came up with a scam before I did. Because the financial institutions, the banks of this world know it's not going to happen. Otherwise, you couldn't get a goddamn loan in London. You know those 30, 40-year mortgages? The world will be over by then. Is Barclays Bank going to give you a motherfucking loan? With the greatest respect, ma'am, it's the greatest fraud that's been perpetrated on mankind this century.
All right, so you hear what it said, right? Again, it's unto us, right, to see the reality. All right? Because of lack of knowledge, our people perish. So that is why anytime the West come out with anything to lie to us, we African, we buy into it and take it and run with it. And in fact, anytime they bring the West, bring something to we African, we take it more than the West. We take it more than the West. For example, let me say this. You know what? The video we did last week about Gayism. Do you know YouTube took it down? YouTube said it was against their so-called policy. But you have all these gay activities on YouTube. YouTube never take it down. But when you speak against it for your own interest and for the interest of your people, YouTube take it down because the same war control those media. They are pushing their narrative. So the same people will come and tell you, say, global warming is caused by human activities. That is not to say global warming is not happening. But the reality here is global warming is not being caused by human activities. Just for history or the analysis that this guy gave, 1,000 years ago, global warming took place. Human activities was never as rampant. In fact, it was never. Human were not digging diamond, gold, or busting the earth, uranium, and all of those things. But global warming occurred. Global warming occurred. In fact, it is global warming that we have Antarctica today. That's part of global warming. Okay? But they took the video down. They said it was against YouTube policy because I talked against Gayism. But if I was going to say lesbian and Gayism should be practiced in Africa, African people should allow it to be practiced, they was never going to take it down. In fact, YouTube was going to help me share it. But because I was educating my race, I was educating my continent, I was educating my people. But because they want for my people to die and perish, they say I was against their policy. But those videos that I show, I also took it from YouTube. So if I took those videos from YouTube and show it and talk about it, then how will it be against your policy, the YouTube policy, when I took those same videos from YouTube? So you see it. So when the United States and Europe came out with their scheme of climate change, they told Africans not to mine their diamond. They said it's going to cause effect. They told Africans not to mine their coal, their uranium. The same minerals that Europe and America, the world has stored, have exploited us for decades, for centuries. But because Africans are telling them to back off, we don't want to listen to you, then that's the time they came with a scheme to tell us we shouldn't mine our resources. It's causing effect to the ozone layer. So when you were exploiting it, stealing it, looting it, it never caused effect to the ozone layer. It never caused an effect to the ozone layer. Yes, Nandin, we are working on it. There is a platform, so we're going to do some research and see. There's a Nigerian Sierra Leonean, he came out with something that is called Africa or African something. And, you know, it's a platform, it's a web platform. And then there was another guy too in Nigeria, and, that came out with another one. All right, just like YouTube and all of those things, like Facebook and those things. So it's two different tabs now. One in Sierra Leone was created by a guy in Sierra Leone, and then one was created by a guy in Nigeria. So we're going to look at them and see how effective they look like. And then if it works, we're going to put a link in here and ask people to subscribe to it, just in case they finally kick us out. Then by that time, you have already subscribed to those, and then we'll just, switch there. So we're working on that behind the scene to see how effective they are if they are not owned by the same colonizer, if they are not owned by them, or if they are not being sponsored by the same colonizer. If it is being sponsored by African and African owned, that would be good. So we're working on it, and then we're going to, if we finalize it, we'll put a link here and then ask people to subscribe to it ahead of time, just in case they finally kick us out, and then we can switch over. Yeah, you see, so that's what happened. So they black out, they took that video down, they took it down totally. What I did last week, they took it down. All right, they took it down, but they want to teach African. All right, so anytime they come out with something, we African, we take it and then they sit behind. Even in America here, okay, white people came out with gay, and then you see our brothers and sisters in America here, they take it, they have it on their head, they commercialize it. You don't see white celebrity like Dwayne Wayne, the way they commercialize Dwayne Wayne and his family. They don't commercialize white people like that. They don't. They don't commercialize them. Which one of the white family you have seen, they commercialize them? Like the way they commercialize black family when they turn into gay. Which one of the white celebrities do you see they give them an award, their child? Why would they want to get an award to a child that transformed himself from a boy to a girl? Giving him an award that is supposed to be given to a black person who have fought for freedom, who have fought for liberation, who have fought to be self-determined people, that is supposed to be given to them. But they take it and give it to a boy who transformed himself to a girl. They gave that award to that boy, encouraging more black boys to be girl, to transform themselves. And you see, we black people, we take it and put it on our head. That's the new movement for black people now. That's the new struggle for black people now. Black people have forget about racism. They have forgot about discrimination. They have forgot about equality. They have forgot about police brutality. The new liberation is for black to become gay. That's the new fight. And when you speak against it, they come against you, they take your video down. That's the new fight. Yeah, now they say, we have had gay people in Africa since before colonization. He's asking question. A lot of the anti-gay law were introduced in the colonial era. Yes, but you see, that is why history is very important as we are discussing it. Now, what people tend to think that it was gay, it was not gay. During that time, that is why we have to study our history. Before colonial time, we also have queen. And those queen, some of them were portrayed as king because some of them were even powerful than king, than a male king. They were powerful. So, bringing themselves down, okay, for men to take, I don't want to use the word advantage. Yeah, I don't want to use the word advantage. But bringing themselves down, okay, to be like woman for men to have them, is like giving their pride, giving their kingship, giving their matter over to that man. It's like, yeah, it's like giving their pride over to that man. So some of these queens, they have men in the house, they have their husband in the house, but they couldn't lay down with the men because they felt that it was going to take that power, okay, that kingship, that leadership, it was going to take it from them. So what they did, they brought another woman in the house. They married another woman. So instead of the man marrying the woman they bring in the house, it was the queen that married the woman into the house. And that woman that the queen married into the house, her husband was going to have an affair with that lady so that they can have baby. It was not her husband that married the lady. It was the queen that married the lady into the home for her husband to go out with this lady so that they can have baby into the home. So that's how it went. So the queen could marry another lady and bring her into the home because she did not want to give her pride, her dominant, because that is dominant. Imagine when a man is having an affair with a woman, you dominate the woman. You dominate the woman. And then you take that woman's pride, her zeal. And then once that happens, that woman have to be submissive to you. And at that time, our queen did not want to be submissive because they were leader, they were ruler. So if they allow their husband to have an affair with them, they have to be submissive. And that means that man is now the king. That man is not the ruler because she has to be submissive as a wife. Because that man have taken her pride. That man have dominated her in bed. So she has to be submissive. In order for that not to happen, she has to go marry another woman and bring the woman into the home for the men to have an affair with so that they can have baby or they can have children. That is why it's good to stay. And then when a white man went and wrote the book, they don't put this thing into perspective as to what happened. So they put it there like, oh, but in Africa, people are doing gay. Women were marrying women. They were doing gay and things. They don't put the real story there. If a white man can write a book and say, the beautiful woman ever lived, King Nefertiti was a white woman, then that is to tell you, these are liars. The beautiful woman ever lived was a black woman. But the white man wrote the book, they came out with a picture, and they said the beautiful woman ever lived was a white woman, Queen Nefertiti. That alone can tell you how our history has been rewritten to go against us, but to favor them. You getting it? Let's continue here. That is why we have to be our own storyteller. We have to be our own writers of our own history. Let's continue here. So that is why, let me just even add in addition to that. That is why in Africa, in Asian Africa, if I have a brother, okay, if I have a brother, and my brother married a woman, and my brother have children by this woman, and my brother died, for instance, my brother died, I will have to go marry that lady, even though I am married, I have my wife. But I will have to remarry that my brother's wife. Now, if a white man or an outsider or the colonizer imperialists go and write about that story, they are not going to write it according to the culture or according to the reason why I married my deceased brother's wife. But there was a reason. But they are not going to give that reason. They are going to write it in a way that will make the African culture look stupid and dumb and crazy and dirty. But there's a reason why I married my deceased brother's wife. It is because I do not want her to be prostitute. It is because I do not want her to take my brother's children into another household for them to be maltreated. Because that's my children. That's the family. That's why we believe in extended family. So that's the reason in the African Asian culture, We marry our deceased brother wife. Not because of sexual pleasure. Let me make that clear. Not because of sexual pleasure. I have my wife, I have my children. But I marry my deceased brother wife not because of sexual pleasure. I marry her because I don't want her to go out to do prostitution work to feed the family. I marry her because I want to take care of the family. I marry her because I don't want her to go out, because if she go out, another man is not going to love her because she already got children. That is why in today's society, our black women are jumping from man to man when they have babies already. They go to another man, the man tell them, no, you already have baby. I can't marry you. You already have children. I can't marry you. That is why we have more single ladies, more single women, because we leave our tradition. We leave our culture. We go by Western standard. We go by Western culture. That is why we have more baby black boys and girls today are on the street in the ghetto gang because we do not have men in their life. We go by Western standard. We go by Western culture. We leave our way of life. We leave our tradition. Because the white men told us our tradition was bad, was inferior, and we take it. That is why Malcolm X said, who told you to hate yourself? So it was reason. It was based on culture. So that those children can be brought out in a family household with a man in the house. Because if I don't do it, my deceased brother, he's not going to feel fine. Even though he's dead, but he's not going to feel fine. Because his children going to be in different households, be treated badly or maltreated by different men. And it might turn out the woman may not even love the children because she's in another household. She's going by what the men say. She had to be submissive to another man. And if that man don't love those children will be lost. And then the effort of my brother will go in vain. So it was traditional. It was cultural. So I had to marry her. And by me marrying her, I also gave her sexual need as well when she needed. It was tradition. So that her pride can be there. So that she can go out there and different men go lay down out with her and then they discuss her. That is why in today's society, our black women are being discussed. Because they go and sleep here, men lie to them, and then men discuss them. But to avoid the embarrassment from the family, I have to marry her. Because if I don't do it, she will go lay down with different men, and they will discuss her. And we leave our culture, we follow Western culture. Then we think it is the best. That is why our women today, they are single. There are plenty out there. That is why we have our boys and our girls, our children, fatherless. There are plenty out there. They are frustrated, traumatized, nothing good. Because if you are not lucky to find a man to love those children, that's it. It's done. Let's continue. Now, we got two short videos, not long, and then we call it for the day. So let's look at the last one here. I mean, the second to the last one. It's just 1 minute from Jacob Zuma. So, former president for South Africa. One thing, look, what made me angry is that our African leaders know these things, but they don't still make the right decision. Jacob Zuma was in power. What is happening? What happened to him? What is happening to our African leaders? Like, they know these things, but when they get in power, they don't take decision. Let's see this here. Let's see something here. So basically, he's just talking about the West, okay? That the West have no good intention for Africa. Anytime you see them coming to collaborate with Africa, is not of good, it's bad. So if we know all these things, why are we still fighting to be identified by them? That's the question.
After
Some people are asking, what exactly is China doing in Africa? What's your take on that?
Western countries have come to Africa for centuries to rob Africa of its resources. They should be admitting what they've done. Some are rich because of the resources they took from Africa. They never thought of helping Africa to develop. They subjugated Africa. They took the political power, economic power, and then made us, therefore, socially, to have no power at all. We had to fight to liberate ourselves. They were never here to help. They were here to rob. After decolonization, they continued to do so. They could no longer use political power. They influenced it indirectly, but they held on to the economic levers of these countries. They were dominating, they were benefiting, they were doing nothing to help us. They created banks that were instruments of subjugating us. They would say, for an example, to the IMF, when the IMF will say, my country is in trouble, can you help? It will put conditions that will put you in a worse situation than before. So it was not helping. What China is doing, China is coming and saying, here we are. We know where you come from. We are here to work with you. For the first time, when China came here, highways began to emerge in the continent of Africa that were never there when they were here all the time. China is working with us. FOCAC is one example that China as a country is ready to sit down and discuss how do we help, how do we relate to one another. And perhaps many other FOCAC summits that took place before, people were not very clear. This FOCAC that has taken place here in South Africa has made matters to be more clearer than any other time. The kind of pledges that China has made and the kind of relation that it has with different countries. China is not here to rob or to colonize. It's here to help Africa develop. President Xi Jinping said it himself. We need to develop together. We are together making progress. These are the issues. For an example, the issue of infrastructure, energy, many others. Nobody took care of these matters. Even if you said to them, we need a road, they never came. If you talk to China, China says, let us come. Let us make the roads. Now, it is even voting money so that we can quicken the decision that has been taken by the AU to create the infrastructure continental. China says that we have taken that decision. Here are the resources for that. Energy, we are together. They are just feeling they are being replaced because they were here doing nothing for the people here, doing something for themselves. China is coming to help. As it helped us in the struggle to liberate ourselves from them, it is now helping us to develop so that we can be economically independent, stand on our own, take our own decisions. We know that argument is a flawed argument.
Now, let me elaborate on what he said a little bit. Something he did not mention, let me mention it. He said, let me mention some of the things he said, but something he did not mention, I'm going to mention it. He said China is not coming to colonize us. It could be true, but China have her own agenda. Is it different from America or Europe? Of course, yes. He said America or Europe, they are angry because what they did not do to empower Africans. The Chinese are coming and they are doing it. Is that true? Absolutely, yes, it's true. We can see that with technology. Okay, the level of technology Africa have today, it did not come from the US. It did not come from UK. It came from China. The level of development in terms of roads in Africa, to be specific, in Africa, it came from China. Okay? When you see the African economies growing today, it wasn't because of US, it wasn't because of UK, it was because of China. In fact, when they are saying Africa is the future, well, by 2050, the world will be Africans. It is not because of the influence of America positively, or it is not because of the influence of Europe positively. It is because of the influence of China positively. When you see Africa having voice today, when you see Africa taking a neutral stand, when you see Africa being esteemed from certain decisions that the US want for Africa to take, it is because of China. It wasn't because of US. It wasn't because of UK. In fact, the US and UK even criticized China that the measure China have taken, it was wrong because it's a measure that are going to empower Africans. And they got angry. They said the Chinese should have taken the imperialist form of doing business with Africa. In fact, they said the Chinese should have taken the colonialist form of business in Africa. And they got angry with China. They said, no, the Chinese did not do that, but rather the Chinese went with 50-50 mutual benefit. And that is benefiting Africa, and Africans are rising up. And that is true. And that is why Africans are turning towards China. But something he did not say, let me measure it. I have said it, and I'm going to repeat myself again. It is not about identifying or being part of Chinese organization or Western organization. You can still identify with China over the US, no problem wrong with that. You can still identify with China over UK, no problem with that, because UK have horrible history in Africa. United States have horrible history in Africa. So we understand, no problem wrong with that. If we want to prefer China over US, over UK, 100%, no problem. But what I have problem with is no one coming to Africa to dominate us. It makes no difference. It's still colonization. It's still a form of colonialism. No one should come to Africa to dominate us. If anybody coming to do business with us, be a China, let it be Africans that are taking a stand, that are giving command to China, that are telling China, this is good, this is bad, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do, this is where you need to go, and this is where you need not to go. Let it be African at the forefront. Let we be the one to determine what is best and what is not best. Let we be the one to say no and yes. Let we be the one to tell China, this is your court and this is our court. Let we be the one to tell China what we want. I don't have problem. We picking China over the US. I don't have problem because US got horrible history in Africa that she need. I don't even know what kind of word to use to describe. I don't even know what kind of word to use to describe. Yeah. US have horrible history in Africa with African people that she need to correct. But up to now, they refuse to recognize that mistake. But they want to take Africa to be a scapegoat. And that's why we say no. So I don't have problem people taking China over US. Because the UK have horrible history in Africa and to African people. That up to now the UK or the EU have failed to recognize that mistake. That horrible history. US and the EU, they have failed to recognize it. They have failed to identify with our history. They have failed to give to Africa, to give to Africans what belongs to Africans. The UK have failed to give to Africans in UK. America has failed to give to Africans in America. But they gave compensation to the slaveholder when the slaves were fighting for freedom. So I don't have problem nation taking China over US or nation taking or Africa taking China over UK. I don't have problem. But what I have problem with is do not allow anyone to come in because you prefer another person over another person. And that person comes and still dictate to you and still overtake your thing. It's still colonization. It's still colonializing. I mean, colonization and colonial. I don't even know how to call it. Colonialism. We should be at the forefront. And that is why African leaders need to come together. That is why Africa needs one currency. That is why Africa needs one army. And kick out Africa. That is why Africa needs one bank. The solutions are there. But African leaders are not looking at the solution. Let's look at the last video and then we call it for the day. All right, this video here again is just another solution that this guy is explaining of how people feel about African. And he said one thing in our video that touched my heart to bring it to today's discussion. And that is one of the main reasons people underestimate Africa. That is one of the main reasons. I'm not saying the only reason, but one of the main reasons that people treat Africans the way they treat us.
Martin Luther made so much emphasis about the color of your skin. The color of your skin, the color of your skin. You see, a French man can fly to America and is not speaking English, but he has white skin. They would defend him that a black skin America that speaks perfect American English, because the issue is the color of the skin. Somebody can leave Poland that does not speak English nor French, goes to America. They will appreciate such a person becoming an American citizen than a black skin man that can speak American English perfectly. That is the reason why we are saying that this color of our skin has a very, very important role to play. There is a possibility for you to land into a country and you're the only black skin in that country. Now, when they look at that black skin, they will know you're a stranger. But if a Polish man lands in a country that is a white skin, they might not know whether it's a Polish or not a Polish. So this color of our skin is implicating us seriously. And you know that racism has been an old age long policy that has been operating in the world since till date. Okay. You look right in football when Samuel Kuffour was playing Bayern Munich. Stefan Effenberg never greeted him with his hands. Never. That racist mentality because he has a black skin. Kuffour was one of the best African defenders we have ever had in life. He would defend goals and even score, go to celebrate. Effenberg would not greet him. That is to say, with all his prowess, the color of his skin is a hindrance in associating with people. This skin color is very, 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 very pivotal in the way they discriminate Africans in other places. As a matter of fact, this is what actually makes you known as an African, the color of your skin. I read a story about Chinese. Chinese don't have respect for Africans because they believe Africans are not developing. That's their anger against Africans. And they don't want to identify people who do not develop.
Now, that discussed a little bit. He said he read a story about Chinese, and the Chinese said they hate Africans because Africa is not developed, or Africa is not at the standard of other world, or is not at the standard of China or Europe or America. And that is a very true statement. And that is true. What that means is power is very important. It's power. We can have all the resources in the world, but as long as we are divided as individual nations, we are never going to have power, because a tiny country like Liberia is not going to have power over the U.S. Because the U.S., the thing that makes the U.S. powerful today, it started from back. She started building herself. She started exploiting people, other nations, exploiting them. Okay? Free labor that built America today, that strengthened America, that made America powerful. UK, France, China. So no African nations in Africa can stand up to these nations. Even South Africa is not being ruled by black, even though we have puppets in power, but we know who rules South Africa. We know who have the economy, the lane of South Africa. So that is why we have no respect. So African leaders, I don't care how you can have all the best diplomatic meeting in Europe and America, in Japan, in China. I don't care how you can dress, Western dress, you put on your tie, your costume, your dress, and go. It's vanity. It's vanity. You are nothing because you don't have power. Because you can't do nothing. You can't even manufacture your own resources into finished product. Because you cannot dictate to no nation in the world that we are not going to give you our resources, because you don't produce your resources into finished product. It has to go to a different country to make it into finished product. And it has to go to a different country to make it into finished product. Why would you want to look down on those nations? Why would you want to condemn those nations? Because you depend on those nations to even print money, to even print your damn money. You have to go to those nations. Why would you want to look down on those nations? You have no power. And that is why we will keep it treated the way we are being treated. Or we'll keep it. They will keep treating us the way they are treating us. And it is a fact. They will keep looking down on us because of our own stupidity.
Africa, Chinese can easily fly to Europe and they'll be comfortable. They will speak well about Europe. But when it comes to Africans, they were maltreating Africans, not because Africans are black, but because Africans do not match up with the growth in the world stage. I think that this, stunted growth in Africa is a very, very strong weapon used by most countries. Nobody wants to identify with somebody that has nothing to add up. That is a raw truth. Now they believe that we embezzle income, we mismanage funds. Do you know that in places like Tunisia, there are places with free hospitals, free education, basic things that countries enjoy, but they come here, we pay school fees. All those things, when they ascertain and look at what we have in terms of resources, Tunisia does not have our resources. But Tunisia, with the little they have, they have been able to upgrade their country to a level where you can admire it. How can a man who is living in abundance die in penury? Such a person come to my country, is a locust to eat everything green because he cannot develop what he has in his house. That's the mindset that they have concerning us. We have more resources than them. Yet, with all those resources, we are still running to their place. Something is wrong with us.
That's the last video. Yes, indeed, something is wrong with us. We have all those resources, but they still call us poor, third world country. They still call us empowered nation, empowered continent with all the resources. But they have limited resources. They are not poor. What is wrong with us? And he mentioned something. And we Africans, we love it so much. He said a Polish, for people from Poland, they don't speak English. They don't speak good English. But when they come to America, for instance, they go to England, for instance, they don't look at them as, oh, you don't speak good English. They don't look down on them, but they treat them because they are white. They treat them kindly because they are white. They don't say, oh, you don't speak good English. But we Africans, we look down on each other. We are the one to tell each other we don't speak English. We don't speak. We tell our friend you don't speak good English. In fact, we Africans believe that if you don't speak good English, you shouldn't get in leadership position. We Africans believe that if you don't speak good English, you shouldn't represent any African nation or any African at the world stage. That's how we feel. We dehumanize each other because somebody can speak good English. We take another man's language as if to say that is savior for us. We discriminate even against each other only because someone don't speak good English. We take that as an issue. But the white men, they don't take that as an issue because they know in Poland, they speak something different. They don't speak English. They speak Polish. So if they come to the US or they go to UK, they don't look down on them because they don't speak English. That's the same way if an Englishman or United States citizen live from here, I'm not talking about black person now. You know who I'm talking about. If they live from here, they go to Poland, they don't expect them to speak Polish frequently. They know they're not from Poland, but they are white. They still treat them nicely. They don't look down on them. If an Englishman leave and go to Poland, they don't look down on them to say, hey, you don't speak Polish. We're looking down on you. You dumb, you stupid, you this. No, they treat them because they are white. They give them all the good and necessary treatment. They don't look down on them. They don't discriminate against them because they don't speak Polish. So when they come to America or England, they don't look down on them because they don't speak English. But we Africans, we insult each other. We degrade each other. We look down on each other because we don't speak the white man language. Even if you go to Africa right now, you even want to speak your African, even in America here, you want to speak your African dialect. It is your own African who will look down on you and insult you. It happened to me one time. I was at work. That was in 2009 or so. I met my African brother and I spoke Loma to him. I spoke one of our local dialect or tribe to him. This African brother was the one that even saw me to the people. He started shouting, you cannot speak different dialect to the job places. Why are you speaking a local dialect to me? He called cry on me that I spoke a dialect to him. He called cry on me. He said, I spoke dialect to him. I spoke a local language to him. In America, you can't do that. You speak English here. But Allah, he spoke. When he got through, I said, then what happened with the Chinese? The Chinese speak their Chinese language. What happened with the Spanish? They speak in Spanish. What happened with the Indian? They speak their local languages. But it is the African man that is bad. It is the African man that is bound to speak their languages, their local languages, to their job places or to communicate. He threw me on in the bus, called cry on me. African. They are English business. They are Western ideology. That it is what killing Africans. It is what killing Africans. But when you go to Asia, they don't care whether they speak Africans. But they are leaders. When they come for the UN summit, or when they come for war or meetings, they speak their pidgin. They speak their pidgin. They don't speak good English, but the little they speak, America don't look down on them. Their citizens don't look down on them. But it is our own African. When our leaders, some of our leaders come to the UN summit, some of our leaders come to the war stage, and they speak their pidgin. They speak like our African way. It is our own African that will look down on our African leader and say, he don't speak English. She don't speak English. She's bad. She's this. He's that. He's that. Our own Africans. Which is bad. So we look down on ourselves. So what do you expect if other nations do it? What do you expect if other nationality do it? What do you expect if other races or if other races do it to us? Because we kill ourselves, we destroy ourselves, we don't have vision for ourselves, we don't even have position. But when you look at Asia, it wasn't English that built Asia. When you look at India, it was not English that built India. When you look at China, it was not English that built China. But Africans, we have that colonial mindset. That is why anytime the colonialists come, the imperialists come, they tell us anything, we believe it, we take it. Even though it may not be in our favor, we take it. But to our African leaders, please, what is your position in this new era of globalization, so-called globalization? What is your position for Africa? What is your vision for Africa? Your vision for Africa, it shouldn't be having meetings with outsiders. Your vision for Africa is for African leaders to come together, host meeting. Go back to the 1963 Organization of African Unity. Go back to it. Look at that mission. It was to unite the entire African continent. It was to have one African army. It was to have one African currency. Go back to 1963. That's your vision. That's your mission. And that's your position. And then we can fight and protect the African continent. And then we can say African out of the African continent. We can say American military out, European military out, German military out. Why should we allow all these military on the African continent? For what reason? We got German military, France, UK, India. And then the United States, they have, in fact, so basically we gave the continent to these people. How can you allow people to come on a continent to have military power over you? We on a continent, we don't have military power, but we allow foreigners to come and have military power over our own continent. Gee, what is wrong? We cannot even protect ourselves. That is why proxy war all over. Every day people die in DRC Congo as we speak. Thousands of people are being killed right now as we speak. But you have all these foreign military on the African continent. They lie to you Africans that we coming on the African continent to partner with you for us to fight terrorists, for us to fight M23 rebel, when they are the same foreigners supporting the M23 rebel, giving ammunition to the M23 rebel. Arm and ammunition used in Ukraine is what the M23 rebels are using in DRC Congo. It's what the terrorists are using on the African continent. Nonsense. while they are there looting our resources. And you sit down, you think the white man come and die for you. The white man did not die for you doing slavery. When they enslave you, the white man never died for you. When they came to colonize you, the white man didn't die for you. When you are getting independent, the white man didn't die for you. In fact, the white man kill you when you are even getting independent. The white man kill your leaders when you are even getting independent. When you are even fighting for democracy, the white man kill all, directly or indirectly, they kill all of your democratic leaders. And then the same white man come to you and tell you how democracy should be. The same white man come to you and tell you we are fighting democracy in Africa. How can you be fighting democracy in Africa when you kill democratic leaders? And we come to our senses here. Sometimes I don't blame these people, what they do to us. I don't. Sometimes I don't. They got to do what they got to do to survive, to keep their economy, to keep their nation, to keep their empire. It is in their favor. But what are we doing? We continue to encourage it. Thank you for starting the end for today's teaching. Thank you for being on. I know we've been here for so long. It was 10 a.m. this morning and it's 1 o'clock. I mean, we can go on and on and on. The messages will keep coming. But hey, I gotta leave you guys to go. You got something different to do. So thank you for being on here today. I will see you guys tomorrow. And I will also see you guys Friday, next week Friday. So hit like, share. If you still want to, contribute to this channel, you can become part of our Patreon. We'll still receive it and stuff. So thank you for being on, and I will see you all next week and also tomorrow. Hit the like, share, subscribe. Okay. You will not get this message from any area other than African. Okay. So let's work together. Thank you. Peace.